I used to think that lockdown drills were pointless in my school because nothing ever happened in our tiny little town. I learned that I couldn't have been more wrong though, and I'll forever be thankful for those drills because they're most likely the only reason that a lot of kids in my grade are still alive today. It all went down during our pre-prom assembly. We had all heard about the assembly from seniors that had to go through it the previous year, and according to them, it was super boring. It was pretty much an hour-long talk about why drinking and driving was bad, something that we were all well aware of, but it didn't even make it 5 minutes into the speech before all hell broke loose. It may have been 4 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Miss Belmont was walking across the stage as she prepared to show a video on the dangers of drinking and driving on prom night. Everyone in the auditorium was quietly talking amongst themselves as they pretended to listen to her talk. But within a matter of a second, silence came over the entire room. Around 200 high school juniors fell silent as the sound of gunshots rang out from the hallway. The way our school was laid out, our auditorium was placed right inside the main entrance, and from the sound of things, the shooting was coming from near the greeter's desk right on the other side of the auditorium doors. 2 shots were fired, and everyone inside the auditorium quickly lowered themselves down into our seats as we listened in hopes that we had all misheard what was going on, but that clearly wasn't the case. Before anything else happened, I'll never forget how calm and collected Miss Belmont was as she spoke over the microphone and told all of us to follow our typical lockdown protocols. All of us turned our attention away from the auditorium doors and looked at the teachers up on the stage as they all gestured for us to slowly come out of our seats and make our way up the stairs next to the stage. Surprisingly enough, we all did our best to stay calm and followed the teacher's directions as we formed multiple lines leading up the stairs to the auditorium stage. The room was beginning to fill with quiet muttering as we all worried about what was going to happen to us, and I remember looking around to see if I could find any of my friends. We all slowly made our way onto the stage, and then one of the teachers walked us over to an emergency exit that was located right on the other side of the curtain. He began ushering people through the door, which was what we were all taught to do since the auditorium doors didn't lock properly. After exiting the door, we were supposed to make our way into the hallway between the auditorium and the music classrooms, and from there, we were supposed to go right into those classrooms and lock the doors as we waited. I was toward the front of the line, and I remember feeling the teacher pull me forward to keep the line moving as we began walking out into the hallway. However, I didn't make it 2 steps out of the door before the few of us that made it out all stopped. We were stunned to see the gunman had made his way around the auditorium and was now looking down the hallway that we're all standing in. We quickly turned around and began forcing our way back into the auditorium as we all yelled that the shooter was in the hallway. We could hear shots being fired as bullets hit the walls near where we had all been standing. Thankfully, we all managed to make it back into the auditorium, and the teacher quickly closed the door behind us. He grabbed a ladder that was right next to him and stuck one of its legs through the door handle and used the rest of the ladder to bar the door shut. It came just in time too, because as soon as it was secured, we could hear the man on the other side of the door trying to force it open. We all quickly stepped away from the door as another teacher made their way around and tried their best to secure all of the emergency exits in a similar fashion. As the next couple of minutes passed, we could periodically hear the sounds of shots being fired throughout the school. Each time it seemed like the gunman was getting farther and farther away, but that didn't matter. Every second that passed, we were all horrified that he would come back our way and try to get into the auditorium again. It took 9 minutes for the police to arrive, but when they finally got there, they cleared out the school and managed to take down the shooter without having to fire a single shot at him. The shooter turned out to be a substitute teacher, and although the 2 greeters along with the school security guard ended up getting shot, they all made full recoveries, and as far as I know, they still work at the school. That was hands down the most terrifying day of my life and the most memorable school assembly that I ever attended. It wasn't until my sophomore year of high school that I learned the importance of keeping at least one ear open when you're in public. And by that, I simply mean don't have both headphones on when you're out of the house. I learned this simply because I had both my soundproof headphones on during study hall one day, and I kept them on when I ran to the bathroom between classes. Well, it was during that time that the lockdown bell rang, and all of the students in the rest of the school were notified to get into the nearest classroom because there was an unknown adult on the premises. As I said, I had my headphones on and I couldn't hear anything, so when I walked out of the bathroom into a cleared out hallway, I just assumed that I missed the bell. I let out a sigh as I figured I was going to get in trouble for being late to class, and I started walking down the hall. As I made my way around a corner, I saw a man standing in the hallway looking around, and when he saw me, he immediately pointed in my direction. I thought that I was going to get in trouble, so I took my headphones off and immediately apologized and told the man that I was on my way to class. I just got held up in the bathroom. He told me that it didn't matter what my excuse was, and that he needed to escort me to class so he could talk to the teacher. I rolled my eyes and said all right as we both started walking toward my class. Right away, I started getting the weird feeling from this guy since he kept looking down at me but not saying anything. We made it to the base of the stairs that I normally took to get to my trigonometry class, which he would have known if he actually worked in the school. But instead of turning to go up the stairs, the man kept walking me down the hall that we were in. That was when I realized that, unlike the rest of the school staff, the man wasn't wearing any sort of school badge or name tag. My eyes widened as this stranger continued to guide me down the hallway, and I decided to ask him what class he taught. He responded by simply saying, "Don't question me." And then he placed his hand on the back of my neck and continued to walk me down the hall. As we made our way around a corner, I could see one of the entrances to the school and knew in my gut that this guy was trying to get me to leave the building. I knew that I didn't have much time, and all I could do was try to run. I started walking a bit fast to try to get ahead of him so his hand wasn't touching me anymore. And the second I felt the slightest bit of distance between us, I quickly spun to the right and sprinted right past him, back down the hall that we came from. I made it to the base of the staircase and started running up it as I heard the footsteps of the man chasing me. As I made it to the top of the stairs, I could hear him getting closer and closer. But thankfully, as I stepped out the staircase onto the second floor hallway, I saw two security guards who were looking for the intruder. I yelled to them that he was right behind me, and they immediately started running toward me. I turned around and saw the man as he made his way back down the stairs, and the school security guards pursued him. At that moment, I noticed one of the teachers across the hall from me gesturing for me to come into their classroom. So I did that as fast as I could and spent the rest of the lockdown waiting for them to tell us that the school was safe. My parents were called and I had to speak with the police after it was all over, and thankfully by the end of the day, they ended up arresting the guy after finding him trying to sneak through backyards in town. They believe he was trying to make it back to his house, which was also right in town. Ever since then, I will always pay attention to any announcement made when I'm out somewhere. For almost everyone, graduation is one of the best days of our lives, but I can think of an entire senior class of students that would disagree. You see, our school had this thing that we did for graduates called the graduation bonfire. It was an all-night event on the football field where the school would host a massive bonfire with music and food venues. It was the closest thing to a school fair that we had, and it was something that we looked forward to all year as seniors. That year, it was a particularly warm night, so a lot of us were hanging out near the water balloon station, just pegging each other with balloons and enjoying our last night at the high school. Everyone seemed to be having a really good time, and for a while, it sort of seemed like we weren't at a school event at all. It just seemed like the first day of summer vacation. That would all change pretty quickly though. After a while of running around and burning through our energy, my friends and I decided to grab something to eat from the barbecue station that one of the local farms set up for us. I had just made it about halfway between the water balloon station and the food tent when I heard the first gunshot. My eyes widened and you could almost feel the tension building in the air as silence came over the crowd. A silence that was broken by the sound of another gunshot, followed by a mass of screams. I turned to my friends who were all looking around, and I yelled to them that we had to get to the school as fast as we could. We started running through the field toward the side doors to the school that had been left open for students to use the bathrooms near the gym, and I noticed that a large group of our classmates were running toward the parking lot. That was when I realized that they had driven there that night and were lucky enough to get in their cars and leave. As for a lot of us, we relied on our parents to pick us up, so we had no choice but to run into the school. I made my way inside and quickly rushed up the stairs. I looked back at my friends and the students around us and yelled out that we needed to get as far away from the shooter as possible. so I suggested we get to the second floor of the school and try to find an unlocked classroom. We all rushed up the stairs as fast as we could, and by the time we made it to the second floor, it seemed as if our group had split in half, with some of the students deciding to take shelter in the first classroom they saw. There was no time to question anyone's moves, so my friends and I just continued moving forward and deeper onto the second floor toward the section of the hall that was farthest away from the football field. Once we were there, we knew there was no time to calm down as we could hear the sound of gunshots getting closer and closer. It's unclear if they were in the school yet, but we knew that they were at least heading that way. As we reached the end of the hallway, I began looking around for an open classroom, but sadly we were having no luck. And the more and more doors that I tried, the more time passed the closer the shooter got. I'll never forget the horrified look on my friend Madison's face as she ran over to me saying that she was pretty sure she heard the shooter coming up the stairs. We all began to panic as we continued opening any door that we could find and trying to force open any that was locked. Thankfully, one door finally budged and we were able to force it open. We all rushed into the bathroom that we had managed to break into, but when we turned to close and lock the door, we realized that we had busted through the lock when we broke in. That was when Madison whispered loudly to us that we should use the window. One by one, we quickly climbed out of the bathroom window and onto the roof. And since I was the last one out, I made sure to close the window all the way in hopes that if the shooter found it, he wouldn't think to look outside. Thankfully, I did, because no more than 5 seconds after I closed the window, we heard the sound of the bathroom door being pushed open and hitting the wall. As quickly and quietly as we could, we all pressed ourselves up against the wall next to the bathroom window, so if the shooter looked out, he wouldn't be able to see us. That was when we heard someone down below calling up to us. "Hey!" A call came from down below. When we looked over the edge of the building, we saw 3 uniformed officers standing on the ground below. That was when the officer informed us that they apprehended the shooter. I looked over toward the window that we climbed out of, and the person that was walking up the stairs turned out to be a police officer who was checking the school for any students. We were all so grateful that we were safe. Sadly though, the principal of the school was sent to the hospital in critical condition before he ultimately lost his life. That was the last year that the school ever did the all-night graduation bonfire.